Well, when it seems like things are frustrating, just know we have some good news for you today. A little bit of good news coming up right now, and I just have to thank her for taking time to come on the show today. Well, I thank all my guests, but this one in particular, Dr. Ruby Dillon, has quite a story to tell. You may have read in WorldNet Daily about the stories of the Child Protective Services. Now, these are the words of Dr. Ruby Dillon that I'm getting ready to interview here in just one moment. She said, "It is the most helpless feeling in the world when this happens to you. It feels as if there is no hope left. I've not seen my daughter since December. She doesn't even look like the same child anymore. There is nothing in her eyes. She looks hopeless, and there is just nothing I can do." That is in reference to her daughter, Alexis, removed from her family almost 17 months ago now. Dr. Ruby Dillon, welcome to the Dr. Gina Show.
Thank you, Dr. Gina. Thank you for having me on the show.
And thanks for being with us. This had to be bittersweet for you yesterday. The little guy, Sammy, basically his custody returned to his parents after it was taken from them for seeking a second opinion regarding a medical condition. And yesterday, they said, the hearing, I guess, went that they said no more spied upon checkups at the doctor, which was scaring the mother to death, because she said, if anything's wrong with him, if anything's wrong, they're going to say, if he has a bruise, if he is breathing funny, they're going to say, you're holding him wrong, and they're going to take him from me again. But she got him back yesterday. The parents both got him back, and it had to be a little bit bittersweet for you. Very happy for them, I know. But what were your thoughts?
Gina, that was such a victory for American families, because had it not been for the public scrutiny and the wonderful success of social media campaigns, that child would have still been under the tyranny of Child Protective Services. So while I'm still dealing with my situation, I just saw that as such a victory for American families.
I did too. I said that I think I posted something on my Facebook page that said something along the lines of that photograph of Tim Donnelly, Assemblyman Tim Donnelly, who fought hard for this, standing next to these parents holding their baby, did more to restore my confidence that we still live in America than any photo I've seen in a decade. And it's true, because I don't know. I just don't think we expected it to go this way. Ruby, let me ask you this. Do you think that it would have gone this way if it weren't for the audit forthcoming?
Absolutely not, Gina. There was no doubt in my mind that had it not been for the audit, that family would have been under scrutiny, and the mother is absolutely correct. They would have found the littlest incident to take that child away from her and justify their actions earlier. So the audit is solely the reason, in my opinion, that that child is back where he belongs, in his family's arms.
And just to back up a little bit, I want you to be able to have time to share your story about your child and where exactly that case is.
So my case is actually going to the DA's office. The Tustin Police Department, which has been the primary investigation agency in the child molestation case, is forwarding charges to the Orange County DA's office as we speak today. So my daughter is still in the custody of the alleged abuser, and Child Protective Services has refused. They told me about a month and a half ago that they were looking into changing their findings. They were consulting with attorneys on how to go back and mitigate their liability. Since I came out in the public, they have basically gone into silence. My daughter is still in the custody of her father, but the Tustin Police Department is forwarding charges to the DA's office with the recommendation that he be prosecuted for child molestation.
And when is the last time you saw Alexis?
I actually am now getting visits with my daughter on Sundays and Thursdays. They're allowing me to see her for 7 hours a day. So after a year almost of having me on monitored visitation for absolutely no reason, no allegation, and then not allowing me to see her for almost 6 months, coincidentally, right before I was supposed to go testify in Sacramento at that hearing, I was given my daughter back for these visits twice a week, which I am so
coincidentally.
so
I don't know about that, Dr. Dillon. I'm thinking maybe that wasn't so coincidental, but thankful nonetheless. Of course, how is she doing?
She is slowly coming around, and I see hope in her eyes. I mean, after not seeing me for all that period of time, but my daughter is incredibly strong. I raised her for the first 5.5 years of her life on my own, and hopefully instilled some strength into her. And I see hope in her eyes, and I see her coming back, and she just wants to be home with her mommy.
How on earth, you practice as a dentist every day. How on earth do you go to work and work on other people's children's teeth every day and see families together and all the time knowing you have this colossal battle? I just can't even imagine what goes through your mind.
I have not been able to. I have not been able to work for almost close to a year now because this has become such a monumentous battle. And, when I started going through this and quickly realized, at first you feel a mistake has been made, and people will realize their mistake and they will correct it. Then gradually, as time went on and things changed, I quickly realized this was not a mistake. This was a calculated, deliberate move in Child Protective Services actions. And that's when I realized I have to fight for my child. And it was impossible to be at my office, to work on people, to be able to give them all of myself when all my heart and soul was just, constantly worrying about my daughter. And not just for my child, but I've met so many families along the way and, who tell their own horrendous stories of the things that they have gone through. And, you realize that incidents like baby Sammy and like my daughter's case, they're not isolated. They're prevalent all across this country.
Yes, and I know this, and it's hard to describe this to people, but I get letters from families that are desperate all the time. People will Facebook DM me and tell me their horrific stories, and that's why when I heard this story about you and about baby Sammy, I wasn't surprised at all because of the mail I've gotten on exactly this subject. But you do have the other side of this. Where Dr. Dillon, they'll say things like, and I've seen this even in the comments just on Assemblyman Donnelly's post yesterday that he tagged me in, they'll say, but what about the kids that are abused, that never get taken away from the abuser? What about those kids? And isn't it worth the cost, they'll say, if some kids have to be in protective services for a little while, isn't it worth that cost to make sure that kids aren't killed by abusers that are never investigated because Child Protective Services doesn't exist? I want you to speak to that question that I get all the time.
Gina, if that was a situation and every once in a while they made an error, maybe 1% of the cases, 5% of the cases, an error was made, and they took a child that really didn't deserve to be taken, then I would say those people are absolutely correct. And Child Protective Services actions would be justified. But the cases that we're seeing, that I've seen, and we had a hearing last Friday here in Orange County that Assemblyman Donnelly attended, and when you hear the horrific stories, you quickly realize that those cases are, I've heard a number that as high as 80 to 90% of the children that are in foster care that, Child Protective Services has terminated the parents' rights or have separated them for an extended length of time, 80 to 90% of those cases, the children should be with their families. That is unacceptable, and it goes beyond just a mere error. And, it's my opinion, after going through what I've gone through and hearing people's stories, that these are calculated decisions that are based upon these funding incentives. And until we remove those funding incentives that gives this agency an incentive to remove children from loving families, this situation is not going to change.
So I want to get to your recommendation because you were telling me a little bit about it when you and I spoke early this morning. But I want to ask you this first. What is your best advice to parents? Say the knock comes on your door and they want your children, and I get letters like this from people all the time. What is your best advice to those parents?
Absolutely. Do not let a social worker in the door. Parents need to realize that they have rights, and if a social worker comes knocking on your door, you do not invite them into your home. If you do not invite them into your home, you cut off a majority of their power, and they will not be able to remove your children from school, at least without a warrant, at least without going in front of a judge. And the least amount you say, the better off you are, and consult an attorney immediately. My other piece of advice would be, once you've made contact with them, do what the Nicolaias did. Have a videotape running in your home, so should they violate your rights, it's captured. And honestly, it is I believe that had that videotape not been out, baby Sammy would not be with his parents today.
Mm. And you have a recommendation. Wait, before I ask you that, I want to ask you one more thing. This audit, how long will it take? And why aren't we hearing anything about it from the California State Auditor?
I don't know the specifics of why we're not hearing anything. You know, my belief is that there is a lot of pressure that is going on, political pressure, and this agency has a lot of power, and they do not want to be audited. So that may be playing a part into it. You know, as for the specifics of it, I don't know those details.
And you had a recommendation for reform. You said when things do change, as inevitably they should, what is your recommendation? How can it be that there is an agency who does do follow up on these cases? Because no question, there are children who are abused. You say your own daughter has been abused by the person who currently has custody of her. So that happens, and those investigations need to happen. How should those happen? And then what should the foster care system look like? And then what should the process look like whereby children are removed from homes?
Gina, absolutely correct. There are situations where children do need to be removed from homes, but the recommendation that I'm going to be making as far as reform is this. When you have a situation where there is an allegation, and that allegation is a violation of the penal code, so whether it's physical abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, but it's a penal code violation that is a misdemeanor or a felony, immediately that case needs to be out of the hands of Child Protective Services and turned over into law enforcement. Law enforcement has the training, the education, and the ability to conduct investigations that you can get to the bottom of what's going on. So in my case, and in my case, it was investigated by the police, but it was shocking to me to find out that Child Protective Services has jurisdiction over a law enforcement agency, so that a government bureaucrat, a government worker, with sometimes, in my situation, only a high school education is able to override the recommendations of law enforcement agents with over 50 years of experience in abuse allegations. So immediately it needs to be out of the hands of Child Protective Services and into the criminal, or law enforcement arena. That would solve a lot. And that actually, in even with, and something we haven't touched on is Gabriel Fernandez. Had that taken place with that child, he wouldn't be dead today.
It's certainly some changes need to be made. I would doubt very much that any honest folks, even those involved with the Child Protective Services, would deny that there need to be some changes that take place. And certainly we're going to continue to hope that you are reunited with your daughter, Alexis, and there will be a new story coming out today in WorldNet Daily with some of these updates and, of course, your story as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Ruby Dillon, for being with us today on the show, and you just let us know as your case progresses. We want to stay in touch with you.
Yes, and one final thought, Dr. Gina, I just want to thank you for covering this type of situation, and really it needs to be brought into the public light. So I really thank individuals such as yourself for helping make that happen.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. All right. Thank you so much.